Hey, what's up, friends and family? In case you missed the discussion a few weeks back, I had Riley Jimison, Summer Mitchell, and Lucas Lee on to discuss beginner pet reptiles. There's a link up here if you want to check that out. Anyways, here's a clip from that episode where the panel discusses what exactly makes a beginner reptile and which beginners you want to avoid. And if by chance you're making a rainbow boa, whether it's a Brazilian rainbow boa or a Colombian rainbow boa, if you're planning on making that your first pet reptile, then tune in tomorrow live via Zoom, not during YouTube, live via Zoom at 6 p.m. Pacific time, and join in on an interview with Ike Lightner discussing entry-level rainbow boa care. The link's going to be in the description, and I hope to see you there. We have a lot of fun. Anyways, without further ado, here's the clip. Hope you enjoy learning something. Lucas, we'll stay right with you. Let me ask you this: what makes any reptile a beginner reptile?
Well, I also like summer, and I think Riley has said as well, I don't love that term. I think that it can be misleading and put certain animals in a box that maybe that box is counterproductive for what we're actually trying to figure out here. So I think that what constitutes a beginner reptile is going to be specific to you, the prospective keeper. It's not going to be based on the reptile itself. And Summer does such a great job of breaking that down in her YouTube video on this topic. It really is more about what you are looking for in your reptile pet and what you're getting yourself into, what you want, what actually interests you and what you're passionate about in an animal. Um, and obviously there's a caveat to that. There are certain snakes that come with certain things that make them a little bit more challenging. Maybe snakes that aren't super well established in captivity, snakes that feed on tricky items, snakes that are rear fang venomous, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of kind of the bigger pool of commonly kept animals, I think what makes it a good beginner snake is it being your favorite snake or reptile.
Mm.
Sorry, I end up focusing on snakes, but reptile, because if it's your favorite and you're passionate about it, you're going to do the work and the research to actually do it right.
I think that's a tremendous tremendous point. Is something that you're passionate about. Good, good, good. Riley, what do you think makes a good beginner snake?
Beginner snake or beginner
I said
reptile?
that. See, I do the same thing. Beginner reptile. Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
I love snakes, but I love
Yeah,
all reptiles too.
I think it's something that one, you have to be genuinely interested in. Two, something that is realistic for the space you can allocate for it, and three, something that fits your lifestyle. I think the biggest thing people don't realize is some reptiles can be high maintenance as far as their daily needs and requirements, and some reptiles can be very low maintenance in terms of what they need on a daily basis. And so to me, the best beginner reptile is something that fits within a person's budget, lifestyle, household space, and what they're truly interested in trying to keep.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Summer, let's move on to you. What do you think makes? And I know you kind of hashed on this in your video, but what makes a good beginner reptile?
So everything that Lucas and Riley have already mentioned, I think definitely applies. And I would say beyond just the kind of logistical aspect, I would say something kind of like what Lucas was getting into, the passion, but something that their personality, however we want to phrase that for reptiles, but their personality matches you or what you're wanting, like if you want to see it, if you want a snake that's going to be sitting out like a display animal, then that's a totally different animal than like Lori was talking about her rainbow boas the other day that she never sees. So it just depends on really what you're after, and not just finding a snake that fits your budget, your lifestyle, your space, your time, but that is going to be interesting to you, because you can look at a pretty snake all day on the internet or in videos or at a pet shop, but then you get it home and if it doesn't do the things that you want it to do, it might not be a really great experience.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And let me stay with you, Summer, and ask you: do top 5 lists suck? Oh, I muted you. Let me throw you back on there again. Because you made the video and you didn't do a top 5 list. So what do you got against them? Do you hate YouTubers?
No, I don't hate YouTubers, but I do hate, in a way, hate's a strong word, but I also think there's this kind of weird ethical thing about labeling these certain animals as beginners that puts them in the position to be more frequently neglected and mistreated because they're perceived as easy and beginner. And
Mm-hmm.
oh, you don't really need to do anything at all to have these. And so then people get them home and they don't pay attention to them, and they stick them in a box under their bed, and they change their water once a month. Like, I just feel like that also can have implications beyond maybe the intended implication of just advising people on what are good pets, but it creates this culture of these animals that are kind of seen as throwaway when,
Mm.
as you mentioned, they live for like 40 years. So that's insane.
Yeah, especially if you're talking about a desert tortoise or something, that someone picks up and it lives 65 years, and they're going to get rid of it. They're probably just going to let it go if they're not ready to keep it. Well, I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in if top 5 lists suck. I think we'll move on, unless someone feels strongly. So, in Summer, let's stay right with you because you're on a roll. Of all the beginner reptiles, which is the worst?
Sorry, I have a habit of muting myself because on other Zoom calls, I usually have to mute myself when I'm not
Oh
talking.
yeah, you're just keeping me on my finger toes.
Of all the beginner reptiles, which is the worst?
Uh-huh.
I mean, okay, I'll say bearded dragon.
Ooh,
Um,
why?
just because I think they require kind of like what Riley was saying. That's an animal that you have to do a lot of daily maintenance for, and we set like, I mean, this is a whole other discussion, but providing the bare minimum for them to just be healthy, not necessarily enriched or like mentally stimulated or anything, but just so that they don't like get diseases and shrivel up and get weird and deformed, is more than, say, a crested gecko or something like that. So if you aren't providing the proper enclosure and stuff, you're going to really see the issues with that animal. And you've also got to feed them daily, multiple times a day, lots of bugs, lots of greens, the whole UVB, the whole shebang. I just think that they're a lot more work than a lot of people realize.
I think that's a great answer. I was just you did it again. I was just thinking, yeah, that wasn't even one I was thinking of. And then as soon as you said, I was like, oh yeah, it's a lot of work. Like if I got one now, I would treat it so differently than I would have 15 years ago. Good answer. Riley, what? Oh, sorry, Summer, something else?
I was just going to say that I have a bearded dragon that I got when I was 11, when I was in my crazy reptile acquiring phase. I still have her. She's, how old am I? She's 17 or 18. She's
Mm-hmm.
old. Um, and yeah, had I known then what I would learn, I don't know if I would have dived into something like that because it doesn't really fit my personality.
Yeah, good point. Excellent. Thank you. Riley, what about you? What, of all the beginning reptiles, which is the worst?
Green iguana.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know why, tell us why.
They will get big enough to actually hurt you, especially in the breeding season, the middle of the summer. An adult male will, he can reach over 7 feet long, and with the head and jaw gape of his size and the power and the tail whip, he can really hurt you. And I've experienced that. And I grew up seeing them for sale in Petco's and other chain shops for $30, $40 or whatever. And being in the retail outfit now, people constantly ask where are iguanas, and I was like, well, we don't carry those because that's not a very easy animal for most people to keep. And they're like, what do you mean? they're at all these other and I'm like, yeah, that thing's gonna get bigger than you. And they're like, what? And they like they never. And most people are like, yeah, I had one for a year and it died, and it's because nobody knows how to keep them, because Petco gives them some cheese grater, cookie cutter little, here, keep it in this little box and it'll be fine. And everybody thinks they're like some mythical fish that only gets as big as this magic box that you've put it in. And they're just monsters, because that's what they are. They're just like big lizards that need a lot of space, and they have a lot of testosterone and a lot of social behaviors and needs. And nobody tells you that at, Petco. And so to me, that's kind of the stereotypical Petco beginner reptile that everybody tries to farm out for cheap. And it's like the worst possible animal for somebody to get into reptiles with if they're not prepared to take care of a big lizard.
And I'll add to that too, because yeah, their teeth are formidable. Their tail whip is gnarly. But I've even had extremely docile, well-behaved females, which aren't as big and are usually a little bit nicer. And their claws, they're designed to hold on to the tree. And so they have these long, razor sharp nails. So just even a docile one, when you're holding it, you will bleed. You will bleed. It's not unlike a cat scratching you, except it's just trying to move on you.
It's worse. I would argue it's way worse, just because of their size and everything, just them moving. I can't tell you how many days I leave the shop scratched up and bloody just from working with a monitor in a positive way.
Yeah, in a very positive way. And it's I don't know, it's fun when you do it, and to the weirdos who are into reptiles, you're like, yeah, look at my arms, working with the monitor today. But like, if you're not expecting that, you're gonna hate that really nice animal doing its normal life. Good answer. Green iguana is it's a terrible beginner reptile. What do you think, Lucas?
Yeah, I was actually also going to say green iguana. I think Riley hit the nail on the head. They are way too easily available for what they are, and not the information provided at like a Petco is insufficient for what the reality of owning that animal is going to be. So with that being said, I guess I would just say that of all the beginning reptiles, maybe interpreting it in a different way, it's not the worst because of the animal, but what I see having the worst outcome because of the situation those animals are put in, I would have to say ball pythons. Just in the short period of time that I worked at the vivarium, the amount of ball python surrenders, if you will, was just unbelievable. Like, I would usually be first one there, and sometimes there would just be boxes at the gate, and like it's to such an extent that the management at the vivarium charges people money to take the ball pythons because they don't expect to be able to sell them. It's like that. It's that level of how many of these snakes are being bought by people that don't have the right information, are just being fed a cookie cutter answer of this is the best first snake for you, and then are unhappy and dump them wherever they can. I think that in terms of what is the worst beginning reptile situation, I'd say just the tragic amount of ball python surrenders, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I would say I'm noticing a trend here. Those are all 3 really affordable pet reptiles at the big box stores. And I think what a lot of people don't pick up on, sometimes they think, oh, cheap and easy, right? That means it must be plentiful and abundant for a good reason. Sometimes it's just cheap. Like, you can get a Savannah monitor for real cheap too, and they're really difficult to keep properly to give them a long, healthy life. Because they eat a diet of an insane amount of bugs, and I don't think what a lot of people realize is that the reason why the cost is so low is it comes in from it's because the import fees are so cheap. They're just imported by the thousands, and or they're bred in such ridiculously high numbers that there's just no demand. Like, you could get any kind of ball python you want just about from the right breeder, especially if you're talking about the less rare morphs. And there's, like Riley, you touched on earlier, there's hundreds of morphs. So you can get that stuff real easy. And I think people mistake easy to get with easy to care for.
Mhm.
So that's I'm glad we're talking about that. Now let's stay on that topic, because I'd always ask what someone should do before buying a reptile, and I think that's, hopefully this is one of the videos they're watching. Maybe they're watching Summer's video. There's also a video with Animals at Home podcast, which one of our viewers tonight, hi Lori, was on the panel, and she was on the panel. They did a group discussion, and they really dove into depth. If you're thinking about getting a pet reptile, I'll put a link to that in our YouTube when I post it. About what you should do before you actually get a reptile and things to consider.